Hello, folks. This is chapter 7, Understanding the Invisibility of Oppression Through Sexism. It's been a little while since I've come to you. Hopefully, folks are getting caught up on the readings. And we had a little bit of a delay, but we're back on track. So let's just get started in terms of understanding the invisibility of oppression through sexism. Oppression through sexism. Today, women have the right to vote and a multitude of other rights afforded to them by law. So by law, this is from 103. Women have rights that they did not have always in the past. Many women in the United States and Canada would argue that women's oppression is a thing of the past. And we hear that a lot. Some folks, I understand that you in the room, you in the class, don't look at yourself as being oppressed. Oppression is a thing of the past. However, sexism is a cogent example of how oppression adapts over time. So it changes, it looks differently than it did in the past. For example, voting was oppressed, but now women can vote. So that's probably the most obvious example. It adapts over time. And I like this here. You notice it says over and how the culture of water is different to see while we are swimming in it. Page 103. The culture of water is different. Feminism, the belief that women are equal to men at the advocacy for the socioeconomic and political equality of all sexes. So that is equal in a sense that men and women can be different in terms of biologically, but politically, they should have the same rights. That's what feminism is all about. You have different waves of feminism. The first wave dealt primarily with the vote in the political realm. You had folks like Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton in first wave feminism who fought for women's voting rights. In fact, Susan B. Anthony never got to see women vote. And about 6 or 7 years later after her death, women got to vote in the early 20th century. And so that would be considered first wave feminism. Second wave dealt with women in the workplace and the right to work and also equal pay. So that's second wave feminism. Third wave deals with equality in the workplace in terms of equal pay. It's more sophisticated. It also deals with sometimes maternity leave. It deals with sexual harassment and those kinds of things. And third wave feminism tends to be more radical. And so one can be a feminist without necessarily being a radical. For example, when they engage in topless protests and those kinds of things. That's the radical fringe. That's what people think about with feminism. That's not necessarily always what it's about. So when I say I'm a feminist, that doesn't necessarily mean I'm radical, but I just support women's rights and women equality. But I personally don't think women and men are the same. I don't want to be the same as my wife in terms of biologically. That's what makes me attracted to her. We are different, so there's nothing wrong with celebrating different. So just because you're a feminist doesn't mean you have to say we're exactly the same, because we're not. Phenotypically, from a biological standpoint, we're not the same. And so that's my sort of position on that. But taking it just a step further, by the way, the 19th Amendment ratified women's vote in 1920. And so just keep that in mind. Women just recently got the right to vote. But a lot of African Americans and other people of color, like Latinas, they argue that feminism doesn't always speak to women of color, but it's really as white women in mind. One of the key arguments is the sense that women of color have always had to work. They've been domestic workers from day one. And if you want to be technical about it, they've been working since they've been on American soil. African American women, 1619, some of the first slaves were brought to this country as indentured servants. So from day one, the women have always had to work in the field. They had no choice. So to say we're fighting for women's right to work is out of touch with women of color. And furthermore, after slavery, if you jump to the 20th century, after slavery, the African American household was so impoverished in many cases that the black woman had to work. The black woman never had a choice to sit at home and let the man be the breadwinner. But women have always had to contribute. My own grandmother was a domestic worker. If you've seen the movie Help, that was a picture of my grandmother. She had to work, and sometimes they would get as little as $2 a day. And she had to raise my dad and their family. They had 8 siblings in the family, and so she had no choice. Her and my grandfather, they both had to work. So that's where we get to black feminism and womanist theory. It speaks to the intersectionality, the nuances of being both black and a woman. The theories arose out of the fact that mainstream feminism often ignores the unique experiences of women of color. It addresses the intersectionality of race and sex. Women of color have a different experience than that of European American women. Please keep this in mind as we continue through this talk. And another thing I want to add, a lot of times it's a struggle for European American females because they will argue that, well, I'm just as oppressed as a black person. That's not what this is about. That's not what, if you leave a course like this with that mindset, well, I'm a woman, I'm oppressed, it's the same thing. It's not the same thing. What I urge you to do is look at the particularities of a woman of color, of a person of color, and the things that they have to go through. Just because you are oppressed in one area does not mean you don't have privilege in another area. Institutions. And so the chapter also defines the notion of institutions, large-scale and established sets of laws, customs, and practices that make up an organization that govern the political and social life of people. There are different kinds of institutions. Schools, churches, libraries, various examples of institutions, universities, government institutions, the White House, the governor's house. All of these are institutions. And sometimes you can have informal institutions as well. So institutions of law, the family is an institution. So they govern the social order, dictate our political and social life. Institutions produce, circulate, and maintain the dominant cultures, policies, and ideologies. So to what extent does Northern Kentucky University maintain the dominant cultures, policies? So male, in this case, for this chapter, the dominant culture is male, the patriarchy. So to what extent does the institution perpetuate that? Generally, for example, first and foremost, you have a male president. We've always had male presidents. To my knowledge, we've never had a female president in the history of Northern Kentucky University. In the same token, if you talk about race, before I came along, there had never been a tenured black faculty in our department, the history of our department. And so those barriers, that's the way that institutions perpetuate the dominant cultures, policies, and ideologies. Now, one might say a woman is not capable of leadership, but that's, of course, sexism. The ideology has shaped these institutions is patriarchy. And that's what I said. Patriarchy is the belief that men are superior. It is the macro level belief system from which sexism flows. Patriarchy. Examples of patriarchal ideology: father of the household, Males has authority in law, government, religion, and culture. So we've never had a female president. Most of your college presidents, although it's changing, are males. Most of your high school principals are males, etc., and so forth, and particularly white males. So the intersectionality of race and class, how do they affect each other? In other words, how does me being, okay, I have privilege as a male, but I'm also a black male, and so that's going to bring about certain oppression in my life. And when we say the word oppressed, often the public will take this notion of oppressed and still say things like we're a nation of whiners and people, they can't take a joke. Everybody's so oppressed. But they have a misunderstanding of how it's used among sociologists. When they say oppressed, they mean something very different. They don't mean oppressed in the sense of being in bondage or slavery, like outright oppression, but the way that society disadvantages a certain group. Women are expected to be obedient and submissive at all times. Men are referred to as Mr., but women are referred to as Miss or Mrs., which define women in terms of their relationship to a man. If a woman isn't married, something is wrong with her. But if a man isn't married, he's considered a bachelor. And there are some religious considerations in terms of God being a father, a male. And I'll be the first to say, I know we have a lot of Christians and religious folks in the classroom, and it may not necessarily be viewed as oppressive in your mind. The Bible outlines God as a male, and so you would say as a Christian that there's nothing wrong with that. That's how you see, that's your worldview, the male as the head of the household, and the Bible does clearly outline that. I would say that's not necessarily oppressive. When you talk about religion, it makes it a little bit more complicated. We can sort of agree to disagree on that. I know we also have atheists and agnostics in the classroom, and I want to acknowledge that as well. But you'll notice me trying to have a balanced conversation, really. And I'm not going to sit there and put my head in the sand and act like we don't have religious folks in this country. And some of them are quite offended about some of these conversations. And then many women choose to stay home, to be stay-at-home moms. I don't want women to feel like they're being oppressed or they're somehow less than because they chose to stay at home. And the traditional way, they meet a husband and let the husband takes care of them. So, in fact, that's how my mom was. That's how I grew up in that generation. So, but at any rate, we live in a patriarchal society. It is truly male-dominated. And women are oppressed in a sense also. We could talk about rape culture and sexual harassment, men feeling entitled to touch women and grope them inappropriately as if they deserved it. So we are trying to challenge that, make the world a more socially just place. So here are some statistics. I like showing this. So this gives you an idea of how this is a man's world. This is a man's world. The old James Brown song. Fortune 500 CEOs, 98% are male. 10 richest Americans, 100% male. No women are a part of that club. 45 U.S. presidents, vice presidents, 100% male. Nobody has been a part of that club. Lately, we've had Hillary that came close, and then also we had Sarah Palin. She was almost a vice president. And so we're getting there, but it's a shame, okay? U.S. Congress, 81% male. Bunch of guys. U.S. mayors, 82% male. That number goes even lower. Think about intersectionality. That number even goes lower when you talk about Hispanic females as mayor. Black females as mayor. The numbers are far smaller than we would like. U.S. governors, 92% male. If to my understanding, there's never been a black woman as a governor. So just think about that. This illustrates that oppression is a one-way historical imbalance of legal and institutional power. People say, well, I don't feel that I'm oppressed. You're looking at it individually. In this class, we look at everything systematically. There's no reverse sexism or any other form of oppression. It doesn't exist because the ism has to do with power. What does this all mean? Oppression through sexism exists today. Regardless of if it was easier in the past or present, it still exists. Things may have gotten better, but it still exists. So some more statistics. In 2012, 1 in 2 women killed worldwide was killed by their partner or family. On average, a woman is killed by her intimate partner every 6 days in Canada in 2016. Every 6 days. On average, a woman is killed every 3 days in the United States. Because women are, why do I have these statistics about deaths and homicide? Women are sometimes viewed as expendable, and their bodies are objectified. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. So it's a dangerous world for women. And many times their partners are killing them. Oppression through sexism. We are led to believe that once women got the right to vote, the issue of oppression was over. Little class discussion. I may post this. I may give you an opportunity. I may make this a post on Blackboard for a grade. I'm sorry, for Canvas. With such and I may add to it, with such an extensive amount of violence against women globally and locally, how and why are so many of us able to deny its existence? So why do you think people deny the existence of oppression and sexism when we see such violence? So I want you to think about that, okay? Reasons why it's so hard to see. Silence that surrounds individual cases, which helps keep gender violence hidden. So, for example, a lot of the campus rapes that happen throughout the United States, particularly there was a high incidence of rapes and sexual assaults at my alma mater. Went to Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. And by the way, they say the Ivy League schools that have the highest instances of rape. So basically, that's read as privileged white males. I'm sorry, wealthy white males, upper class white males with a sense of entitlement. That's just how it is. And I'm not indicting anyone for the color of their skin or make you feel like a bad person, but that's just a current reality. And often, when a woman is raped, they blame the victim. They say she shouldn't have been dressed like that, or she shouldn't have been drinking. Those are two separate issues. If you have moral convictions that you want to dress modestly, or you feel like women should dress modestly, and you feel like public intoxication is a social ill, that's a completely separate issue from rape. So if a woman is saying that she's been raped and she wants to report it, it shouldn't even come up how she was dressed. We have to deal with the issue of sexual assault. When we see oppression as an isolated event, it makes the broader spectrum to seem harder to see. So in other words, if you look at it just yourself, I don't feel oppressed. You say I, or my friend, she's oppressive more than anybody else. So that's looking at it individually. But in this class, I want you to look at it at a broader perspective. As global, as societal, institutional, national, statewide, universities. Conceal the way social institutions organize and hold sexism in place. Media and advertising allows denial yet constant reinforcement. They establish norms. So a big topic is discourses of sexism in advertising. Advertising is a multi-billion-dollar industry. And obviously you've heard the term sex sales. And they use inappropriately dressed women or sexual themes to advertise a whole array of products. Everything is advertised is gendered. Everything is advertised is gendered, showing the division of men and women. Shampoos, floral scents. Women tend to migrate towards softer smells, flower smells, sweet candy, whereas men tend to migrate towards pine or musk. Now, is this biological? I don't know. To a large extent, it is sociological. We just associate flowers with women. But at the same time, in terms of the nature-nurture debate, I know I prefer a more flowery scent for my wife as opposed to something like Cool Water cologne or a pine or a musk smell. So to some extent, I would argue that it is natural, biological, but to a large extent, it's sociological. When a woman is associated with an advertisement, it is considered not masculine enough, which drives the man away from using the product. And then we get to the objectification of women. So there's a video I want you to watch. I'll make a space for it on the page in terms of the objectification of women. I will warn you, it's somewhat explicit, depends on your taste. Some people will think I'm being an old fuddy-duddy by saying it's explicit. To me, it's explicit. And because I actually don't consume pornography because I have some moral issues with it. And, you know, a lot of folks say in America we're ashamed of the female body and all these kinds of things. But pornography is exploitive. It leads to rape culture. It leads to the sex. It's tied directly to the sex trafficking industry. It's tied directly to child pornography. It exploits women. It objectifies women. It reprograms our brain in terms of how we look at women. And so it does a lot of damage in our culture. So for me, some of these advertisements, I have to kind of struggle between, am I perpetuating these ideas by showing it? But objectification means looking at women as objects to be desired and not seeing them as a person, as your sister, as your mom, as your auntie. Here's some advertisements here that I want you to check out that go right along with what I'm talking about. Show her it's a man's world. I mean, she's literally kneeling at his lap. How humiliating. What a jerk. He's just sitting there too. And this one in the middle is advertising abuse. If your husband ever finds out you're not store testing for fresher coffee, if he discovers you're still taking chances on getting flat, stale coffee, woe be unto you. For today, there's a sure and certain way to test for freshness before you buy. So she's getting a spanking. She's getting like a child. That's abuse. I hate to be mean, dear, but I do wish you could get my shirts wider. What a jerk. He says, I'm ashamed to wear this shirt. It looks dingy. Heaven knows I try, but I just can't get close nor or bright. These are old advertisements, but these ideas are still around. When women don't leave the kitchen, we all know a woman's place is in the home. I don't know that. Cooking a man's delicious meal, but if you are still enjoying the bachelor's life and don't have a little miss waiting on you, then come down to Hardee's for something sloppy and hastily prepared. So, yeah, this self-explanatory. Discourses of sexism in movies. So, film and movies and television, they really perpetuate the idea of objectifying women. We are all socialized by this white culture. You might say, well, I don't think like that, but you can't help it. It's the air that we breathe. It's like fish in the water. They don't really know this is water. That's the life that they live. We can tell what kind of character a woman plays in the movie based on how she is dressed and her attitude. So, for example, if a woman is dressed scantily clad, the idea is that she's overly sexual and she deserves everything that she gets. Even in the old the slasher films, the old horror movies like Friday the 13th, generally the woman that's getting killed is the one that's sexually active and sexually loose. And it's almost like she deserves to be killed. And the studious woman, usually they portray a woman with glasses, conservatively dressed, and that's the smart woman. So these discourses, that's a smart woman in terms of how TV portrays it. Like in The Faculty, I remember the old movie The Faculty with Usher Raymond. A young lady has glasses on and her hair is pulled back. She's an attractive woman, but you're not supposed to really look at that because she has glasses and her hair pulled back. She's really smart. So that's kind of how it's portrayed. In romantic movies, aka chick flicks, the storyline is always a fairy tale like Disney. A woman is single, independent, has a successful career. She's too busy to ever think about herself. She meets a man. All of a sudden, her life has changed. These movies make it seem that women are desirable women aren't desirable without a man in their life. Think about music videos you've watched recently with women in them. Like Cardi B is a well-known hip hop artist. She is an Instagram sensation. I think that's how she got famous. She's really, to me, she's a foul-mouthed person, but she was an ex-stripper, and so she's an example of how sex sells. And what really she is known for is her sexuality. I mean, she's known for her hip hop, her rap, but would she even be famous if she wasn't overly sexual? Her pop culture is surrounded by the lack of respect for women. Lack of respect women have for their body and overall value. This is just setting a terrible example for the younger generation. I know I personally have 3 daughters, and I'm not comfortable with them dressing a certain way. Now that's somewhat conservative, and you might have a different idea of it, but I tend to think that it draws the wrong attention to young ladies that dress in a quote unquote inappropriate way. Now I'm admitting that is a conservative perspective, but at the same time, the larger question is just the objectification of women. Women in our culture, we can't appreciate them for their brains and their intelligence. We can only appreciate them for their body, and that's problematic. Pornography, I said a few words about pornography already. It goes right along with the sexualized culture we've been talking about that's geared towards portraying women a certain way. Porn used to be a topic that was never really talked about publicly. In the text, Senso and D'Angelo, they actually courageously point out that the porn industry is worth $96 billion. And the reason I say courageously, because it's in everybody's home. We have access to it through our phones. We can access it through our laptops, through Netflix, etc., and so forth. And it does nothing good for women in terms of how we view them. Pornography has become pop culture. I want you to think about that. Pornography has become pop culture, and a lot of us have the mindset in the classroom. I'm not here to judge or anything, but we have that there's nothing wrong with porn. But studies do show that it's really damaging to the mind of children. You got children 8 years old consuming pornography, hardcore pornography, because they can access it. They're left unattended with computers and cell phones. Even right now, folks that are sitting with their cell phones, you can just access it right now if you wanted to. To me, that's problematic. Pornography shows the gender differences between men and women by the brutalization, the emotional degradation of women. Women are being choked, slapped, and gagged. And we think it's funny. We laugh, oh, being choked, gagged. But how does that cause us to view women? Women are portrayed in these ways for the pleasure of men. That's patriarchy right there. Please view the video to see examples of sexism and softcore porn in the music videos. And this will kind of reiterate the point. So check that out, sexual objectification of women in music videos. And you can kind of have a sense of what we mean here. Binaries of women. By the way, I will post those videos here soon. Well, you should see them by the time you view this online. You'll have a chance to post. So just some binaries. Binaries, either or thinking. Black and white about women. Free, restricted, modern, primitive, active, passive, individual, group, industrious, idle, pretty, ugly. So it makes no middle ground. And it causes us to be very judgmental towards women. When we are blind, simplistic examples, when we are blinded by the nature of oppression through sexism in society, we often need the most simplistic examples, explanations. We place ourselves in a better state than, say, a Muslim woman because she has to cover up. We are free to wear what we please. Discussion in class. Is this true? Though, are women in the U.S. really free to dress as desired without experiencing sexism? So what I want you to think about, I kind of went through that fast. We like to pride ourselves as Americans that we can dress any way we want. And we say Muslim women are oppressed. And that's debatable because a lot of women in Islam choose to dress that way to honor their religion, wear the hijab, cover their heads, and it's the way to honor God from the Muslim perspective. But Americans, we think, oh, they're so oppressed. But are we really free to dress as desired without experiencing sexism? Are women? That's debatable. That's debatable. So Just think about that. Media questions for reflection. How do we feel about women in the media? Music videos, song lyrics. And I'm going to post this, and stories all deal with common themes and looks. Why? Makeup, sex, drugs, nudity, sexualized women. How do we feel about this in terms of, do you feel like the society is getting worse? Women are dressing overly provocative? Or are you okay with that? Women should be able to dress how they want. This is the crux of the debate. Are music videos partly responsible for the way women are treated and viewed? You can also talk about television and movies as well. So I'm going to post this as one of the questions. So these are some examples. I'll end here that I felt like are explicit. Well, this is Queen Bee. This is Beyonce. My critique of Beyonce, I'm not going to hate on her. Let me start off by saying she's very talented, beautiful woman. She's married to Jay-Z. They're a power couple, one of the most powerful couples in the world. They're entertainers. But I've always argued, and people get upset with me, that Beyonce, we don't ever get to appreciate her for her intelligence and for her music, her singing. But she's known as a sexual person. But what about when she gets older? What about when she can't sort of throw it around and flaunt it? Then what? So I'm very critical of somebody being called a role model as a woman. When we have examples like Hidden Figures, we have examples of women that are doctors, that are screenplay writers. They write for film and television, movie producers. They're animators. Women are professors and scientists and historians and lawyers and doctors, and teachers. And our role model was somebody that's overly sexual. Everything, just about, even the picture there, everything that Beyonce wears is sexually revealing. And she can dress how she wants. She's a grown woman. I'm not her father. I'm not her pastor or whatever. But I'm allowed to be critical of our so-called role models. Having said that, she's very successful. I respect that she was able to go out and make a name for herself and make some money. That's pretty cool. Do I need to say anything about in the middle? That's just so sexual. Then, what's the difference between a black woman doing it versus a white woman? Are there implications of that? Yes, there are, because people look at black women as overly sexual. That's a stigma. And then women are always putting things in their mouth as sexual. So that's all. I'll stop here just to give you something to think about. Until next time. Actually, I lied. I had one more slide. I'm sorry. I didn't lie. I was misled you, perhaps. Just some questions. The English language uses masculine and feminine versions of words such as hostess, hostesses, actor, actresses. Is it sexist to use such words? Male students, what do you think the most difficult thing is about being a woman in today's society? So put yourself in a woman's shoes. Female students, in your experience, what's the most difficult thing about being a woman in today's society? Female students, what do you think is the most difficult thing about being a man? Male students, in your experience, what's the most difficult thing about being a man in today's society? So these are questions that you'll see in various capacities on Canvas, and we will be done at this time.